thing. Two of the lights are not working up there, so need to put some new ones in. Put a light on the scene. Yeah, it's been a bit of a rush day today. However, it's been a good day. We just came back from the local tractor supply store. We take care of some, we feed 4 neighborhood cats. They kind of go to everybody's house. They move around, but they come to us first thing in the morning to get fed. And then we have some little shelters out there that they can go in. And my wife decided to start doing some investigation as to how she could keep them warm, because we get cold weather here in Southeast Texas. The only difference is it comes in winter comes in days here, and it doesn't come in weeks or months, which is kind of good. So it can be really cold one day and it can be quite warm the next day. But and I don't know how much help they really need. But anyway, to cut a long story short, my wife decided she needed to buy some straw to line whatever containers we use. And Tractor Supply Store gave us some good advice, so we came back with a plastic container that she said a lot of the shelters use, and we're going to put straw in there, and it will keep them warm. Let's hope they use it. So that's kind of a brief aside from today's reading. Today's reading is, it's something that we should all take notice of. It's one of those things that is easy to state, but it's harder to put into practice. And at least that's my opinion. So here we go. But it is definitely something that we should all be aware of. It's called Stamp of Approval. And excuse me, outside it still is a little bit chilly. My nose has a habit of running then. First quote is from Audre Lorde. She was an American writer, philosopher, teacher, feminist, poet, civil rights activist, and she was born in 1934 and she passed away in 1992, but she was pretty active. And this is what she has to say. If I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. Well, it's pretty graphic, huh? God in the midst of me approves of me. That was Ernest Holmes in a Holmes Reader Unchanged, page 14. God in the midst of me approves of me. Well, if that's not immediately clear to you, it probably will be after we've done the reading. And this is from Reverend Kris. She says, approval is a tricky thing. We've been raised to seek it from those around us. Our parents taught us how to behave and respond with approval or disapproval. Teachers had expectations and their approval or lack of it, and they came with positive or negative consequences. I went to school from starting school until I was almost 18, taught by a mixture of nuns until I was 11, and then to a Catholic college run by priests from 11 onwards. So I know about the negative consequences. On the playground, we quickly learned how to interact with other children to fit in, creating a hierarchy of popularity that persisted into middle school, high school, and beyond. However, we rarely discuss our own approval. We spend so much time seeking validation from family, friends, co-workers, bosses, and even strangers that we often overlook whether we approve of ourselves. Despite it being the most important, self-approval is often lost on our list. Reverend Kris goes on to say, in my younger years, I constantly reshaped myself to fit in to an ideal. With each move, job change, or hobby, I crafted plans to be the perfect version of myself. Happier, thinner, quieter, more peaceful, more popular, less weird, less nerdy, more organized, and definitely prettier. Yet, after a few days or weeks, I would revert to my old, and she says, in brackets, authentic self. It took me a while to realize I needed to stop focusing on what I thought I should be based on other people's approval. and instead discover my own values, my own desires, and my own dreams. By working to become the best version of who I truly am, I found that my own approval is far more important than that of the world's. With my own approval at the center of my life, I have a much better chance of success. Well, some people, in my humble opinion, are much better at this than others. You know, they live up to that great statement. I first heard it, my wife first heard it from, who was it now? One of the, I think it was Wayne Dyer. I think we first heard it from Wayne Dyer, but he probably didn't think it up. And that is, what you think of me is none of my business. It might have been Eleanor Roosevelt who first said it. Anyway, somebody well known. What you think about me is none of my business. And that's exactly what she's talking about here. She's talking about the fact that in an ideal world, our own approval of ourselves should be more important than other people's approval or otherwise. However, what is unsaid here is that implies that we have a balanced personality. You know, if we have an unbalanced personality, if we're egomaniacs, then that's a whole other story. You know, to me, what Reverend Kris is saying here applies to somebody who's got a reasonably well-balanced personality. You know, we're not down at one end completely, you know, and thoroughly disgusted with ourselves. And we're not at the other end, we're not complete egomaniacs thinking everything we do is perfect and everybody else is wrong. So we got to be somewhere in the spectrum in between that. So having said that, yes, you know, we shouldn't, maybe we ought to flip this around a little bit and say we shouldn't be behaving and basing our life on the approval of others, but we should be basing our life and seeking our own approval for getting along with ourselves, and that's where spiritual practice comes in, and also for getting along with other people, recognizing that we're human beings and that we live in a society, in a community. We don't live isolated lives. We're not hermits. So we have to take other people into consideration, like on the road. You know, for goodness sake, when you drive and when I drive, let's be aware of the fact that there's other people out there on the road driving, and if we can be polite towards them, and if they were polite towards us, then driving would be a much better experience and much more pleasurable. So what I'm saying is that there's balance in everything. So our own approval is important, yes. However, that implies to me that we are somewhat balanced in our approach to life anyway, that we're not off at one spectrum where it's just us, and at the other end of the spectrum, it's just everybody else. You know, we're not going to go into deeper relationships, like relationships with a higher source, whatever you want to call the higher source, right now. So what do you think about that? I think it's a good reminder, but I also think we need to be aware of the fact that we have to be having a balanced personality. It's kind of like when my wife and I went on marriage encounter a year into our marriage. I've talked about this before. At the church we were attending, they were big on what was called marriage encounter. We didn't know what it was. So they would have people come out there and speak about it, explain it. And they said, this is intended for people who have a decent marriage, and it's to help a decent marriage become better. If your marriage is in deep doo-dah, or it's rocky, then don't come, it'll make it worse. So it's intended for people who got a stable relationship to start with and just make it better. And in my opinion, this reading is for people who got a reasonable relationship with themselves and the rest of the world to make it better. And if you're not, if you're at one end of the spectrum or the other, and you can recognize that you're way off too much in the ego or way too much on being completely down on yourself, then you need help. You can approach a practitioner, a minister, or you can approach a therapist of some sort of counselor, depending on how serious it is. And if you come to us, you ask for help, and we think it's beyond our ability to help you, then by all means, we'll refer you to somebody else. And maybe it's stuff I can deal with either as a minister, practitioner, or as an emotional freedom technique practitioner with my new skill of identity healing. Then I'll help you with that. But I will be honest and tell you, if something is beyond my ability to help, I will not make things worse. I will actually make things better by referring to somebody else. So to me, what's unsaid here is that it needs to be someone with a reasonably balanced personality to actually succeed at this. So that makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you. My own values guide my journey. My own values guide my journey. And this is assuming in the first place that you have set values that work in the world. They work for you and they work for your place in the world. My self-approval is the compass that leads me on my true path. My self-approval is the compass that leads me on my true path. And then again, that presupposes, as I said, that you are somewhere in that balance spectrum to start with. So that's all I got for today. I've got to get off because I got a board meeting to attend in about 20 minutes or less. Let's all take a deep breath. And just let it go very slowly. And if you've done that reasonably well, you're going to feel a lot calmer than before you took that breath. I certainly do. Until next time, namaste. Oh, yes, Reverend Lisa will be on tomorrow, 9:15. I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully, 5 o'clock. Namaste.